Hello class, welcome back. You might be like, well, another video, what's going on? It's a great question. All right, so one more thing that we are going to be starting this week, and probably the most exciting part of this class, is the project, right? So this week, what we're going to be doing is actually starting on our project proposal. Super exciting because the project is probably my favorite part of the class. So many interesting solutions come up, etc. So I'm really excited to see what happens here. Um, but today, what we're going to go over is the project proposal and overall architecture of what the project is, and then also just your first deliverable that will be required. So, with that, let's hop right in. I'm really excited for you all to see the project, and I'm really excited to see what you all come up with. All right, so let's hop right in. So, first, let's do a quick overview of the project. So, for the project, you've been asked by some imaginary client to help solve a problem, right? Now, you get to choose the problem, which is super cool, right? And basically, what you're trying to build is a website, right? An app, web app, right? And part of this is to use some sort of API to basically get information to display on the website, right? So you're allowed to use any public API. So I've given two links which have some public APIs. So all right, so if we take a look here, right? So first there's this GitHub public API which we can view. And so this has a list of public APIs. It tells you, okay, is an auth required, is HTTPS required, is core support, etc. Right? Pretty good, right? So this is very nice. And then also there's a new one I found this year called publicapis.dev, which also gives a great list of public APIs and again says the same thing, right? So it requires API key, cores, HTTPS, and has some really nice category structuring. So there's a lot of good options, right? So one thing I'd like to note is as you come across these APIs, right? First of all, don't like first of all, try to avoid APIs that use OAuth, right? OAuth is a little complex to set up, and it'll say that if it's OAuth or not, but always try to keep it with API key or no key, right? So like for here, this is no key, but this is API key. Those are totally fine. And also, if possible, try to keep cores, right? Just as a just makes it a little easier, but either way, that is something you can bypass and we can figure out ways around. But yeah, so as you're doing this, right, so what I've seen over the semesters is, obviously students choose one, but then it doesn't work out because as we go through a semester, you start learning how to use the APIs and it doesn't work well. And that's totally okay. So as you're building out this project proposal, what I would suggest is you really think of the main concept that you're trying to build, right? And try to find an API that meets the requirements, right? And once you find that API, right, use that. But if you need to change later down the semester, totally fine. Happens all the time, not a big deal. Okay. Now, one other thing to note is so this project, right? Um, you can work with up to one other person, right, for this project, right? Or you can work on this completely solo, right? You don't have to have anyone, so it's either you and one other person or just yourself, right? This project is totally doable in either way. That is up to you if you want to find someone, that's totally fine, but you do not have to, right? Um, and one thing to note is if you do choose to have a partner, please inform us. We have to set it up manually in the grading system, so please let us know. Otherwise, we won't be able to accurately grade your assignment or grade your project deliverables, right? Because when we set it up, it makes it so that both of you only have to submit one, right? So just keep that in mind, right? So send us an email, open a Discord ticket, and we'll set it up, but please let us know, right? So as a heads up, right? Now, as you're building this project, the idea of this is to build a contemporary or a modern dynamic web application. So what you're going to have is a front end. So what that means is a UI, right? But like we've been building HTML, CSS, JavaScript, we'll learn, right? So you'll have that. And then something really exciting is you will have a backend. So we'll be using Supabase, which is a database. We'll go into that later in the semester. And we're going to deploy this to a real website using Vercel, and your backend has to be in JavaScript, right? So as a heads up. So it'll be you basically in the backend, you will get data from your database and supply data to the front end, right? And a lot of your data for both the front end or backend may be retrieved by these APIs. So these APIs will help structure, here's the type of data that is available to me to reflect on this website, right? So keep that in mind, right? And so while you're making your project, you're going to be expected to make technical um, decisions, right? So you're going to have to be using front-end libraries, etc., right? So for this proposal, what you're going to do is first define a problem statement. So what's the problem you're solving, providing the exact API that you're using, a description of the technology you expect to use, and then choosing an open API, right? You can use the ones I provide on the list, or if you want to use your own, totally fine, right? So whatever you want to do, totally fine. One second here. Okay, yeah. If you want to use your own, also totally fine. Then outside of that, you have to make technology decisions. So first, this class, you can make some assumptions. So for example, you know you'll be using HTML and CSS, JavaScript, and then for the backend, you'll be using JavaScript as well. But you know, try to look at different things you might use, maybe like different concepts you might use, right? And then how you're going to leverage the database, right? What are you going to store in there, etc., right? And then lastly, wireframes. So for the wireframes, you are required to have considered the following elements. So your main page, home page, and what you're going to give out of this is very rough mock-ups. So they can be hand-drawn just to explain the layout, etc. So all of that's possible. Now, on top of that, right, there is the um, final proposal and the project API. And we're going to go closer to those as we get closer to those deliverables. For now, I would suggest focusing on the problem statement, right? And then as we get a little closer to the final deliverable, etc., we'll have a different discussion on what those are going to require, right? So with that, I am really excited to see what you all come up with. I'm really excited to, I personally grade each one of these because I love seeing the outcomes of this. So please reach out if you have any questions. If you're unable to find a topic or you're unable to really think of an idea, I'm happy to help. So let me know. All right. All right. Thank you all, and I will see you all next week.